America's best chance at seeing Donald Trump's tax returns may depend on the outcome of two major cases at the Supreme Court today. Cases that could also give the president theoretically more protection against congressional investigation if they go his way. The first, it's a criminal investigation against Trump being run by the Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance. Vance, he's investigating whether Trump and his companies violated New York law when he paid Stormy Daniels and another woman to keep quiet about alleged affairs. Vance, he subpoenaed Trump's accountants, then Trump sued to block them from releasing the documents. In the hearing, audio of which was broadcast live, a majority of the justices seemed sympathetic to the Vance case and less so to the arguments from Trump's side that he is immune from prosecution and investigation. All eyes on Chief Justice John Roberts as he summarized a key argument from Trump attorney Jay Sekulow.
In other words, it's okay for the grand jury to investigate, except it can't use the traditional and most effective device that grand juries have typically used, which is the subpoena. I don't know why you don't resist the investigation in its entirety, or why your theory wouldn't lead to that.
The other case, it had a lot of similarities, but with one key difference. In this one, it was Congress, specifically 3 Democratic-led House committees, seeking Trump's tax info. They claim a legislative need for the tax return, saying they might impact future legislation. Trump's team says their goal only to investigate, embarrass, and trip up the president. The Democrats, they're seeking documents from Deutsche Bank and other banks that do business with the Trump family and their company. Let's bring in our guest, good friend to the program, former federal prosecutor Roland Riopelle. And Roland, to me, and tell me if I'm overstating this, but what's at stake here is the president above the rule of law as long as he or she's sitting in the Oval? Do we really have any checks and balances?
Richard, I think that's exactly right. The president's argument here is that he is effectively a king, and there is no one who can tell the king what he can't do. And he may take that position even if the Supreme Court says, those subpoenas are valid, you must respond. He may just thumb his nose at the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court can't do anything to enforce the subpoenas. It can order that he produce records in response to them. But if he doesn't, the only avenue the Supreme Court has is to go to the executive branch and ask it to enforce the subpoenas. And Mr. Trump is the top of the executive branch, and he will refuse to do it.
You know what, in any other time, I'd say, we're drinking kind of Kool-Aid to get to that point, but it's highly plausible from the last 3+ years that you could see that. I did find it interesting, I don't know if you found the same, Roland, that the Q&A, it was pretty pointed, and it looks like Roberts is looking for some middle ground here. None of the 4 traditionally liberal justices showed any kind of qualms about pushing hard here that the president clearly in the wrong and without absolute power. But I thought, and we played the clip from Roberts, it seems that the justices are inclined, at least on the surface, to say, wait a minute, take the tax returns, for example. You promised as a candidate to turn them all over. You have precedent. Previous candidates and previous presidents have turned over the returns as candidates. You said it wasn't an impingement when you were running and promised to do so when this mythical audit was going on. Why not now? Maybe they can delay it till after November, but it seems on the face of it, it would be a surprise, at least from the hearings today, the testimony, that they wouldn't probably err on the side to say, no, you, Mr. President, are accountable to the legislative branch.
I think no question. The statute at issue in the congressional subpoena context is very, very clear. It doesn't give the president any real discretion to, or the court really any real discretion to quash the subpoena. Mr. Trump is absolutely obligated to turn those records over unless he gets an unprecedented, unanticipated ruling from the Supreme Court, which I don't think he's going to get.
I came across a quote from Attorney General Barr early portion last year where he told the Senate committee that we have to stop using the criminal justice process as a political weapon. Now think about that, to where the Attorney General now finds himself today. We saw it most recently, obviously, with General Flynn and where he came down. And you, along with 2,000 of the former Department of Justice officials, signed a letter saying it's now reached the point where Barr has to go. Can you put in historical context just how much, compared to any AG, this Attorney General has put his thumb on the scale, basically serving as a personal attorney for the president?
Yes, that's really the core problem here, Richard. If the Supreme Court says, yes, those subpoenas are valid and you must respond, and Mr. Trump says, the heck with you, Supreme Court, I'm not going to do whatever you say, in a real world, an independent Attorney General and an independent Department of Justice would set about enforcing the subpoenas that the courts have ruled are valid. But I don't think anyone can have any faith that Mr. Barr and those who work for him at the Department of Justice will do that. They see themselves as entirely subservient to the president and as having no independence, any independent judgment, any independent authority. And as a result, those of us, and I was one of the 2,000 signers of that letter, by the way, who worked for the Department of Justice when it did have a sense of independence, are just outraged by what is going on. I mean, what happened in the Flynn case is really, really unprecedented and awful. And I fear that we'll see the same thing in connection with these subpoenas. We're in a full-on autocracy mode.
At that point, our friend Dan Goldman, who served as lead counsel during the impeachment hearings, he said, and I wonder if you don't think this is going too far, he said, I fear the dismissal of the case against the president's ally Flynn at the president's urging is just step one of the dismantling of the rule of law in this country. Step two may be the arrest and prosecution of the president's enemies. Then we're simply an autocracy. And before people dismiss it out of hand, at yesterday's bizarro press conference, at one point, the president's now talking about Obamagate, the greatest crime ever perpetrated by a president. When asked what the crime was, he said, but nobody does. You don't think Dan's talking in hyperbole here, do you? You don't think that there's a line Trump wouldn't cross between now and November?
The short answer to that, Richard, is no. I don't think Dan is being hyperbolic. I think, I hope Dan is wrong, but I fear there is a good deal of accuracy to what Dan said. The president is unleashed. He has no guardrails anymore. All of the traditional brakes on presidential power have come off. And I think the Supreme Court is going to find that as a result of its past rulings, it is now completely neutered in its ability to deal with the president. And he's going to do whatever he feels he wants to do, and nobody's going to tell him no.
I unfortunately think Roland's right here, and I think people underestimate just how much and how dangerous a desperate President Trump, when he looks at the polls, could be here. But like Roland, I desperately hope I am wrong. Roland, my friend, it is always good talking to you. Let's talk soon, all right?
Yep, pleasure to see you, Richard.
Be safe. All right, everyone, when we come back, some new numbers. They give us a snapshot of where the presidential race stands right now. Again, those polls I talked about, we'll show you that. And also, we'll provide you an inside look inside the Trump campaign and allegedly what's happening behind the scenes between President Trump, his campaign manager, and even, yes, Jared Kushner.